Welcome to Superhero Rundown. I'm Crimson, and today we talk about the most important Avenger, Thor. I say that even though I still love America's ass. Yeah, I've always identified with Thor. Outsider, coolest Avenger, most worthy, and we're going to explore his arc in that context. The notion of Thor being worthy from his beginnings to his joining up with the Guardians at the end of Endgame. Let's talk about how Thor has grown up. When we meet him, he's a brash, bold young man who lives in Asgard. We also know he's had Mjolnir for a long time. Given that he's arrogant when he learns of the Frost Giants invading the weapons vault, he suggests going to Jotunheim. Odin, the All-Father, says no, but arrogant, stupid muscle boy does it anyway. Odin saves them in Jotunheim, and Lofri, the king of the Frost Giants, declares war on Asgard as the Odin sons are returned to their home. Odin tells Thor he's no longer worthy of Mjolnir, strips him of his power, and exiles him to Earth. Oops. Although, Odin does have the foresight to put Mjolnir on Earth as well if Thor becomes worthy, or anyone really, I guess. Initially, he's pretty arrogant on Earth as well. But I really like the diner scene because he's actually trying to be respectful of human culture. As soon as he smashes a mug, Jane tells him not to do it again, and he immediately complies. He may not understand humans, but he certainly understands how to be adaptive. Once Thor finds out about Mjolnir, he invades S.H.I.E.L.D. He's still arrogant, so obviously he can't lift the hammer. Loki appears to Thor after he's captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. and tells him Odin has died and Loki himself is king of Asgard. Thor thinks he's lost everything at this point. Man, he was so naive then. Wait 10 years, my dude. Thor does recognize that Jane has been kind to him and gets her book back from S.H.I.E.L.D. when Eric grabs him and convinces Coulson to let Thor go. Thor explains Yggdrasil to Jane and tries to adjust to his new life, knowing he can never return to Asgard. When Loki sends the Destroyer, Thor decides to confront the Destroyer by himself, with no powers, in New Mexico, with no powers, while it levels a small town. Thor has now learned humility. He apologizes to Loki and tells him that innocent human lives give him nothing in return. The Destroyer murders Thor, who has no powers, but Mjolnir, finding that Thor is worthy again, leaves the S.H.I.E.L.D. pavilion where it was and goes to revive Thor, who now has powers. Thor goes back to Asgard to confront Loki, who reveals that he wants to...
You can't kill an entire race. Why not?
Why does every supervillain want genocide? You remember when villains wanted simple things like their mother back from Mephisto, revenge, to impress death? You know, the simple motivations in life. Anyway, Thor, in order to stop Loki from killing everyone on Jotunheim, decides to break the Bifrost with Mjolnir. Loki argues that he won't be able to see Jane, but Thor breaks the Bifrost anyway and defeats Loki. After Loki disappears into space and Thor is saved by Odin, Thor openly admits that he still has a lot to learn. Part of the reason I like Thor so much is that, yeah, he's arrogant and a hothead, but he does learn, and he learns faster than most. He's also incredibly smart, and he knows how to be brave in the face of danger, even when that danger is fire to the face. In Avengers, we see that Thor genuinely cares for Loki, and doesn't really care about Loki's frost giant blood. It's actually beautiful, because Thor carries that with him through the whole saga. Loki is trapped on the helicarrier, but tricks Thor into getting locked in the cage instead. Loki remarks that the humans think they are immortal. I want to talk about how Asgardians skirt around the god moniker more than most. Loki isn't Asgardian, but Thor doesn't really say that he's a god. Natasha tells Cap that Thor and Loki are basically gods, and Nick Fury tells the council that Thor took the Tesseract because Thor made the decision and he didn't want to argue with the god that did. It's really telling of the respect that Nick Fury has for Thor, especially after Coulson probably told him what happened in New Mexico. During the battle for New York, Thor helps to bottleneck the portal by using the Chrysler building as a lightning rod. Can I just say, that is so badass. Thor really wants to help Earth because of Jane. He is a good man, and it's obvious his arc keeps building. First in his battle of being worthy, then helping his friends, now he encounters an Infinity Stone in his girlfriend. We find Thor in Valheim trying to bring order to all the realms after Loki messed everything up in Avengers. He does have a humor streak as well now, even with everything that has happened to him thus far. In one fell swoop, he beats the toughest guy on the field and wins Valheim back to peace. He's also a good friend, telling Hogan he doesn't have to come back to Asgard until he's ready. Thor asks after Jane, but Heimdall can't see her, so he goes to Earth to find her. Two things happen. Jane slaps Thor because he laughs, but he takes it in stride for the most part, and Darcy asks,
"How's space?"
Space is fine.
The ether defends itself from the police, and he takes Jane to Asgard to get it out of her. Odin tells him to send her back to Earth, but then it attacks the Asgardians, and Odin's like, well, gotta deal with this now, I guess. During a skirmish where the Dark Elves try to get the ether, Frigga is killed as Thor arrives. She dies in Odin's arms, and the Asgardians give her a funeral worthy of a queen. This marks the first time Thor really loses something dear to him. Combat isn't really as important as his mother. And yet, he wasn't able to see Jane physically after the first Thor movie, but Heimdall still kept an eye on her, so he could still check in on her now and again. Frigga dying marks grief in Thor for the first time in a way that he won't heal from. In his grief, he confronts Odin and wants to get the ether away from Asgard to protect the people, but the Allfather will not budge. So, Thor enlists Heimdall, the Warriors 3, and Loki to help move Jane off-world to confront Malekith, who wants the liquid Infinity Stone. Loki is still mourning for Frigga, and Thor asks for his help. Thor reveals that he hopes his brother is in there still. It's very telling of Thor's forgiving nature, even after what happened in the battle for New York. But Thor is also realistic. He tells Loki if he betrays Thor, he will kill Loki, which shows that Thor will do what needs to be done. Thor also shows he doesn't know how to think everything through, like how to fly a Dark Elf ship, for instance. Loki leads them off-world, and the two argue over Frigga. Thor wishes he could trust Loki, but Loki tells him to trust his rage since Thor doesn't understand emotions. They fight Malekith with Loki's magic, but it doesn't work because he can't just explode an Infinity Stone that's a fluid. It's not how that works. Anyway, Loki dies. Thor defeats the mediocre villain guy in Greenwich. Yes, I'm still mad about it. And when Thor returns to Asgard, he tells his father he doesn't want to be king and that he just wants to be worthy, still thinking Loki is dead. Thor, you're so dumb. If it weren't for the face makeup, I would facepalm, but I still love you. In Age of Ultron, the Avengers gather around Mjolnir and take their turns trying to wield it. It turns out that Steve comes closest, and Thor notices, indicating that Steve may one day wield it since he's obviously as worthy as Thor. Ultron attacks the Avengers, and then Thor confronts Tony about it, telling the Avengers that Ultron took the scepter they worked so hard to get. Loki's scepter, in case that wasn't clear. During the film, Thor is basically gone for most of it, but when Bruce and Tony are creating another Superbot, Thor helps them. He lightnings Vision to life and tells the team he had a dream and that the Mind Stone can help them defeat Ultron. The other Avengers aren't convinced like Thor. Vision gives Mjolnir to Thor, which manages to convince the Avengers he's a good boy, but, man, I'm not sure he's just been born. I love that lifting Mjolnir is totally the benchmark of being a good person now. Now I can join the ranks of other good people like Beta Ray Bill, Jane Foster, Thor, Vision, and Hela. Oops. At the end of the film, Thor tells Steve and Tony that since Vision lifted the hammer, he can keep the Mind Stone. He then departs for Asgard. During Ragnarok, we see Thor has let loose a bit and is actually more fun than he used to be before Ultron. We know that Taika Waititi and Hemsworth himself had a hand in the shift in the character, but it's nice to see on film, particularly now that we know the Mind Stone is safe with the Vision. Thor and Loki go to Earth to find Odin, who's in Norway, with the help of Doctor Strange. The Allfather tells the boys he has failed them. He tells them that he loves them, and this is something they must face alone. Hela, the goddess of death, and their older sister. Odin goes to be with Frigga, and Thor loses him too. Hela comes out of her prison and just straight up shatters Mjolnir. In the span of about 3 minutes, Thor loses his father and his hammer. Loki asks to be brought back to Asgard, but along the way they are taken out of the Bifrost Stream by Hela. Thor lands on Sakaar, which is just forgotten junk for the most part. I think it's rather telling that he lands on this planet, as he is still dealing with the death of both parents, losing Mjolnir, and who knows where Loki wound up this time. He's brought before Jeff Goldblum and used to fight. He meets Korg and Meek, fellow fighters, and when he tells Korg about Mjolnir, Korg remarks that losing it is comparable to losing a loved one. He also meets Valkyrie, who is an actual Asgardian Valkyrie. In the arena, Thor meets his opponent, who turns out to be the Hulk, who's also been missing since Age of Ultron. Thor tries to reason with the Hulk. He even does the lullaby that Natasha did for him, but it doesn't work, so he fights him instead. The thing is, Thor knows how to deal with the Hulk. He's seen how the Hulk operates. That's the thing about all these guys. They know each other and know how to confront each other's weaknesses. It's what makes the Avengers a cohesive team. Thor is becoming more powerful now that Odin is dead. Was Odin also holding back his potential? Thor calls to Heimdall, who tells him to go through the biggest gateway to come back to Asgard to stop Hela. He still has help and he knows how to use it. Hulk helps Thor get to talk to Valkyrie, and Thor is told about Hela's betrayal. Hulk comes to confront Thor in the ship as Thor tries to power it up to go to Asgard. Thor shows him Natasha and he reverts to Banner. Thor tells him Ultron was 2 years ago. He tells him they are going to find out how to get to Asgard. Banner, Valkyrie, and Thor discuss options and decide they need to get a ship that can handle the Devil's Anus. Yes, Taika Waititi actually calls it the Devil's Anus. I am so glad I didn't make that up. Thor tries to reason with Loki, but Loki tells him they were never one to communicate. Thor tells Loki he would do amazing things on Sakaar, and says that he...
Loki, I thought the world of you. I thought we were going to fight side by side forever, but at the end of the day, you're you and I'm me. And I don't know, maybe there's still good in you, but let's be honest, our paths diverged a long time ago.
Thor has realized that he can't make Loki good. Loki has to do it on his own. But Thor accepts him for who he is and loves him in spite of everything that has happened to them. Thor can still predict Loki, and Thor does call him the god of mischief and refers to himself as the god of thunder. So there is that. Can we talk about how every child of Odin does the Odinson fight pose? It's spectacular to say the least. Thor, Banner, and Valkyrie manage to make it through the Devil's Anus after a ship chase. Thor goes to the palace while Valkyrie and Banner help the people. Thor goes to sit on Odin's throne and Hela goes to confront him. Thor and Hela fight while the people go to escape via the Bifrost. Thor is getting beaten by Hela but keeps fighting, even after losing an eye to her. Thor sees Odin and his father tells him that Mjolnir was never the source. It was to learn to control his powers. Odin tells Thor that Asgard is a people, not a place. Thor embraces his power as the god of thunder. Thor gets into the fray as the god of thunder. No hammer. Just him and his strength and a kick-ass Led Zeppelin track. Thor, Valkyrie, and Loki confront Hela as the people evacuate Asgard. Thor tells Hela that she can have Asgard as Surtur comes to bring Ragnarok to the planet. Thor watches as Asgard is destroyed, but Heimdall believes in him doing the right thing because the people are safe. Thor and Loki reunite despite everything. He becomes the new king of Asgard, even though he never wanted it in the first place. Thor decides on Earth to settle them after the destruction of their new planet. In the End, the MCU was a saga about failure by Rafael Motomayor. He tells us this much about Thor. Ragnarok is known for gifting Hemsworth a comedic edge, but it goes even further, completely humiliating Thor in ways we don't really see in superhero movies. The same Vanity Fair article states that it was actually Hemsworth's idea to rip our idea of Thor to shreds by cutting his godly golden locks and destroying his hammer. After skipping Civil War in order to go out into the universe to prevent Ragnarok, Thor ends up having to allow Asgard, the place he's sworn to protect, to be destroyed by a giant lava creature he had easily defeated earlier in the film, while forcing his people to become space refugees. Ugh. I will say, in spite of everything, Thor was actually done justice in Infinity War, and I cannot emphasize how much that pisses me off. I already hashed that out, so let's talk about Thor and why he's the coolest. After Thanos steals the Tesseract from the Asgardians and wipes half of them out, Thor is rescued by the Guardians. Gamora tells them all about Thanos. When he learns she's Thanos' daughter, he comforts her. Thor decides to take their pod so he can go get a hammer. He recruits Groot and Rocket to take him to Nidavellir so he can go get a new Thanos killing weapon. Rocket goes to comfort Thor.
Absolutely. No rage and vengeance, anger, loss, regret, they're all tremendous motivators. They really clear the mind, so I'm good to go.
Thor has now lost most things he cares for. His parents, Loki, Heimdall, the Warriors 3, his sister, Mjolnir, and his home. He's a refugee, but he still has people willing to help him. Thor believes that fate is why he's alive, but he's got nothing left to lose. He has the Avengers, but they're humans, and humans are fragile. And he knows it. They arrive at Nidavellir and find it dark. Thor explores the place, and Eitri comes to attack, saying that Asgard was supposed to protect them. Thor tells him Asgard was destroyed. Eitri tells Thor that he made a gauntlet for Thanos to protect the dwarves from him. Thor starts the forge at the cost of his own life, and they create Stormbreaker with Eitri. Groot binds the Guardians forever to the Avengers, which is honestly super badass and amazingly awesome. Thor comes down as Stormbreaker calls the Bifrost, and Thor helps the Avengers against the army of Thanos. After Thanos gets all the stones, Thor comes to hit him with Stormbreaker and misses. Thanos tells him he should have aimed for the head and snaps. Thor is spared, but the damage is done. He failed to kill Thanos. Motomayor continues. If Thor and Hulk hadn't suffered enough in Ragnarok, the opening scene of Infinity War kicks them while they're down. Thanos' ship decimating the Asgardian population heading to Earth. Loki, the last remaining member of his family, dies at the Mad Titan's hand. This devastates Thor, who, as he reminds Rocket and Groot, is 1,500 years old. An early poignant scene, perhaps the emotionally strongest one before the snap, shows a vulnerable side of Thor we didn't know existed. He lost plenty in his previous films, but it wasn't until he met Thanos that Thor explicitly expresses how miserable he felt, how scared he could get, and how human the God of Thunder really is. This losing streak then motivates our hero, setting him on a path to create a new weapon that can kill Thanos, avenge his people, and replace his hammer. Thor's only goal in Infinity War is to deal the killing blow to the Mad Titan. When the moment arrives, Thor fails, injuring Thanos, but ultimately doing nothing to prevent him from snapping his fingers and decimating half of the universe. The absolute last straw for Odinson, this just breaks him and sends him down a path of self-hatred, crippling regret, and depression. Though it wasn't just his fault. If anything, Quill was more directly responsible for Thanos succeeding than anyone. He still sees himself as the strongest Avenger who ultimately couldn't do his job. In Endgame, Thor feels the weight of his failure to kill Thanos, but Thor finally kills Thanos by going for the head like he was told to. After that, Thor is not seen for 5 years. He runs New Asgard, which is in Norway, and is only seen once a month. Hulk and Rocket go to see him. They find him a mess, having gained weight and grown out his hair. Emily Heller explains why this is significant, and Thor's reaction to his new look is the only one that matters. At the beginning of Endgame, we discover that the decimation has hit Thor the hardest out of all the Avengers. That makes sense. He's been bleeding friends, family, and homeland since Thor Ragnarok, and he was powerless to stop Thanos from personally killing his brother Loki and his pal Heimdall. Thor blames himself for the entire snap as well. If he had just cut off Thanos' head when he had the chance, maybe he could have stopped the inevitable. It's a heartbreakingly human moment for the God of Thunder, and even though everyone reassures him that it's not his fault, anyone who's made a mistake that hurt someone they care about knows that won't help. Thor doesn't like hearing the name Thanos and gets pensive, then tries to throw them out. Hulk is trying to be nice to him, but Thor says that he's the one who killed Thanos. Thor refuses to help them, but Hulk won't budge on it, and Rocket convinces him to come with beer. Motomayor tells us why Thor's arc is so important in Endgame. Filled not with grief, but with regret and anger, Thor begins his arc in Endgame with one goal in mind: chop Thanos' head. Yet when he does cut off the Mad Titan's arm and head, he discovers how utterly meaningless that goal was. He didn't change anything. The stones are gone, his friends are still dead, and he still failed. After the tremendous loss and sense of personal failure Thor went through, he retreats to New Asgard and spends the next 5 years drinking the pain away and playing video games. His spirit is broken, his purpose is non-existent, and the former god is now a PTSD-ridden husk of his former self. His beard and hair are long and ragged, his bathrobe dirty, and his abs replaced by a considerable beer belly that keeps him buzzed throughout most of the film. Thor becomes the target of too many fat jokes, but he doesn't seem to care about that. He's crushed under the weight of what was expected of him and his failure to achieve what he was meant to do. This is the lowest point we have ever seen a superhero, especially one that started so high and mighty that his dad had to send him to New Mexico to learn how to become a better person. Thor goes to Asgard with Rocket in 2013 during Dark World. Rocket explains what the plan is to get the ether, but Thor decides to continue to use alcohol as a coping mechanism instead of helping Rocket. Thor sees his mom and starts having a panic attack. I really like how they broke Thor all the way down. It's important for his character. He's lost everything. His parents, Heimdall, Loki, Mjolnir, his home, half his people, and now he's gained weight and feels worthless. All because he believes that he failed the Avengers in killing Thanos, even though they all lost. Thor runs into his mother because she's a witch and senses him. He tries to shrug it off, but she knows that Thor's from the future. His mother says he's seeking counsel from the wisest person on Asgard and tells him that
I'm not supposed to be like everyone else, am I?
Everyone fails at who they're supposed to be, Thor. The measure of a person, of a hero, is how well they succeed at being who they are.
He bids bye to his mom, and Thor remembers Mjolnir. He tries calling it and realizes he's still worthy. And that right there is the most important moment for Thor. It's not him beating Thanos, it's not getting buff again, which he doesn't do. It's him knowing that he's still worthy, even after failure. Failure doesn't make you any less worthy. Period. The science guys set to work on the gauntlet. Thor wants to do it, but the others tell him that he's in no condition to. Instead, Hulk snaps and brings everyone back due to the gamma radiation. As he does, Thanos' ship comes through the time heist MacGuffin and attacks. After the building collapses, Thor keeps watch. Tony and Cap join Thor, who informs them that Thanos hasn't done a damn thing. Thor calls for Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, and the three go to confront Thanos. They go toe-to-toe with him while the others are still trying to get out from the rubble. I really like that Thor doesn't become ripped again when he calls Stormbreaker and Mjolnir. He becomes a Viking warrior, but keeps his weight, telling us that he is mentally there, but still has a long way to go. I can respect that. Thor gets saved by Cap, who picks up Mjolnir, whom he knew would be worthy since Age of Ultron. Thanos stomps Thor and goes after Cap. Everyone comes out of the woodwork and joins the fight as Hulk got them all back. And they win, wiping Thanos' army out. Back in Norway, Thor hands Asgard to Valkyrie. He wants to be who he is, so he joins the Guardians of the Galaxy. And Thor learns a lot in the MCU. Emily Heller elaborates in her article, Thor's reaction to his new look is the only one that matters. By the time the fight against Thanos rolls around, Thor regains his confidence and, more importantly, fully owns who he is. He undergoes an emotional transformation that is entirely unrelated to his physical changes. What really sold me on this choice for Thor was that when his friends needed him, he cleaned himself up and stood up straighter. But he didn't magically become ripped again. He took a shower, braided his hair, and put on a new suit, or the equivalent when you have a magic hammer, and he looked damn good, beer belly and all. Endgame brings Thor full circle in a way that's quite moving. In the original Thor, the son of Odin is a little bit of a fuckboy. He's arrogant and combative and struggles to become worthy of Mjolnir after being exiled to Earth. He eventually proves his worthiness, but spends the next several films grappling with what exactly worthiness means, especially after failing to save his mother. Thor sees Frigga again in Endgame, during his jump back in time to retrieve the Reality Stone. She immediately knows that he's from the future, but not because of his physical changes. She can see it in his eyes. She knows he's hurting and reassures him that everyone fails at living up to their expectations. Thor is probably the only Avenger who goes through such a complete arc and survives by confronting his emotions head on. He confronts failure head on. He is actually the strongest Avenger, and no one on the team knew it, not even Thor himself. Thor proves that in spite of everything, you are still worthy, even when you fail. Worthiness doesn't hinge on failure or success. It hinges on who you are and embracing who you are meant to be. And guess what? I'm worthy, nerds. Die mad about it.